The day my sister poured a glass of cheap whiskey over my notebook and hissed, "You'll never make a living growing fungus. It's a circus act, not a career." The air in my childhood kitchen cracked like a cold wind breaking through a thin pane of glass. I stared at the ruined pages, at the damp ink bleeding into my plans for turning abandoned city lots into thriving, detoxifying mushroom farms. That moment, my own blood turning on me, the people who were supposed to lift me up pulling me down, was the detonator that launched the story of my life. I walked away that night with nothing but a battered backpack, a handful of spore prints, and a fierce, stubborn resolve. The corporate lab that had fired me for exposing the hidden pesticide dump was a distant memory, a scar that reminded me why I could no longer trust a world that rewarded silence over truth. I left behind the polished lab coats and the sterile conference rooms for something far messier. An old, graffiti-covered warehouse on the edge of the industrial district, its concrete floor scarred by years of spillage and neglect. Inside, I set up rows of terrariums, each filled with reclaimed substrate, ground coffee, spent grain, even shredded newspaper, and inoculated them with a cocktail of native fungi I'd spent months cultivating in secret. The first weeks were a silent war against skepticism. My mother called me an eco-hippie at every family dinner. My brother laughed that my mushroom hobby would never pay the bills. And my sister, still nursing the sting of my defection, asked pointedly, "Will you at least bring home some dinner?" When I tried to explain the science, mycelial, the way fungi can bind heavy metals, break down hydrocarbons, and restore contaminated soil, I was met with blank stares and rolling eyes. They called me a glorified gardener, an eco-trickster, and the word failure followed me like a cloud wherever I went. But the work didn't stop. Night after night, I tended to my colonies, watching the white mycelial threads thread through pollutants like veins stitching a wound. When the city council announced a pilot program to clean up the abandoned rail yard behind the supermarket, I seized the chance. I pitched my idea for a mushroom farm on the margins, a project that would transform the derelict lot, once a dumping ground for oil drums and rusted car parts, into a living laboratory of bioremediation. To my surprise, a handful of councilors listened. They saw the numbers: 95% reduction of lead, 80% detoxification of petroleum residues within 6 months. They gave me a modest grant and a permit to plant the first beds. Months turned into years. The lot blossomed. Green shoots of cress and wildflowers pierced the once barren earth, while massive oyster mushrooms sprouted from the cleaned substrates, their caps glistening like tiny suns. Neighbors who once scoffed at my weird venture now stopped by to ask for fresh mushrooms, to learn how they could grow their own food on contaminated ground. Local schools arranged field trips. High school science fairs awarded projects that built on my methods. The project grew, spread to 3 more sites across the city, and within 5 years I was overseeing a network of urban mycology hubs that collectively restored over 300 acres of blighted land. The municipal health department cited me for outstanding environmental leadership, and a documentary crew followed my journey, dubbing the initiative the Fungi Frontier. Through it all, the sting of past ridicule never faded. It simply hardened into a different kind of fuel. When the city announced a ceremonial ribbon cutting for the newest restoration site, a reclaimed wetland that now teemed with dragonflies and songbirds, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Meeting at 5 p.m. Bring the family. Mom's proud of you." I laughed, the sound echoing through my studio, and set off for the first time in a decade to return home. The day I arrived, the house smelled of cinnamon and fried onions, a stark contrast to the earthy, loamy aroma that clung to my boots. My parents sat stiffly on the living room couch, their eyes fixed on the screen of a laptop displaying a time-lapse of my latest project, a once toxic industrial lot now covered in a kaleidoscope of mushrooms, beetles, and buzzing bees. The camera lingered on a massive oyster mushroom, its white flesh trembling as a gentle breeze brushed through the newly regenerated canopy. Below it, a plaque read, "Restored by the hands of my name, urban mycologist, founder of Fungi Frontier." My sister, who had once called my dream embarrassing, stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. She swallowed, eyes glistening. "I can't believe this is you." She turned to my mother, who stared, mouth agape, as a cluster of shiitake mushrooms unfurled on a rusted metal beam, a visual metaphor of growth emerging from decay. "All those years, you said he'd fail," she whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air. "We were wrong. We were the ones who failed to see." My father, who had once slammed the kitchen door on my ambition, said nothing. He simply rose, walked over to the wall where a framed newspaper article about my work hung, and traced the headline with his finger. "Mycologist turns urban blight into green oasis." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and remorse. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't understand what you were trying to protect." In that moment, the weight of their past derision crumbled. The house, filled with the soft rustle of a family finally listening, felt like a sanctuary reborn. They didn't need to apologize for every snide remark. The transformation in front of them spoke louder than any confession could. The success of my work had delivered a poetic justice that was both personal and universal. A reminder that the very soil we tried to poison can also nurture redemption. Later, as the sun set and painted the sky in bruised purples, we sat on the porch, the scent of fresh mushrooms drifting from the kitchen where my sister now helped me sauté them in garlic butter. My mother reached out, her hand squeezing mine. "You taught us that what we dismissed as a hobby could actually heal the earth," she said, her voice steady. "And maybe, just maybe, it healed us too." That night, as I lay in the familiar bed of my childhood room, the ceiling fan turning lazily above me, I realized the core lesson that had driven every spore and every sleepless night. The ground we walk on may betray us, but it also holds the power to restore us, if we dare to plant the right seed. My family's mockery became the fertilizer for my purpose. Their doubts, the dark substrate that made the light of triumph all the more radiant. The story I now carry isn't just about mushrooms or contaminated soils. It's about how a single, shattering moment of rejection can launch a relentless pursuit, how relentless effort can turn mockery into a monument, and how returning home, not to prove yourself to them, but to let them see the fruit of your perseverance, can rewrite the narrative for everyone involved. In the end, the biggest victory wasn't the thriving ecosystems I cultivated, but the quiet, unspoken forgiveness that blossomed between us, a reminder that karma isn't a cruel judge. It's a patient gardener, waiting for us to plant hope, then watching it bloom. And now, as the night air carries the faint, sweet fragrance of mycelium, I know I am finally home, not in the house of my childhood, but in the richer soil of my own making.